Hi. Do you know what time it is? It's Sista Brunch o'clock. That was terrible, but I don't know. ChatGPT recommended that, and I thought I'd try it out. You are now joining us for another episode of Sista Brunch, because it is Sista Brunch o'clock. We're the podcast sharing the stories of Black women and gender-expansive people thriving in entertainment and media. Each week during our regular season, we share some time with a person we think that you should know and whose work we think that you should know and support. And after 4 seasons, Sista Brunch is starting to move beyond our little at-home podcast studio and get out into the world. You can catch us at Sundance, you can catch us at the Essence Film Festival, and you can keep up with all that we have happening on our Instagram account at Sista Brunch Podcast. You can also sign up for our newsletter, read the transcripts, listen to all of our previous episodes on our website, sistabrunch.com. For today's guest, I am so honored to welcome the distinguished Reginé Gilbert to Sista Brunch. She currently holds the James Weldon Johnson professorship at New York University, which recognizes scholarship with far-reaching impact in the areas of social justice, inequality, and criminal justice reform. She's also author of the book Inclusive Design for a Digital World, and she is a pioneering researcher in inclusive and accessible augmented reality, AR, and virtual reality, VR. And we're going to really dive into those things because we haven't talked about those on this podcast. And so as soon as I met Reginé, I was like, this is somebody that we should have on. So welcome, Reginé Gilbert.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
So what we like to do with our guests is to ask you for our first question to go back as far as you would like. Could be your great-great-great-great-grandparents' birth, could be your parents' birth, could be your birth, or could be later in life. However far back you'd like to go that brought you to this moment that we're in now.
Well, it's very interesting that you ask that question because just yesterday I was teaching my user experience design course and I decided to share my story with them. And I talked for 45 minutes.
Perfect. Okay, then that could be the whole episode.
Story. Yeah, I mean, I basically told my story of going to college. I really wanted to be a photographer when I was younger, but my parents were like, absolutely not. What are you thinking? You're going to study business. I ended up getting a degree from Arizona State in communication. I studied human behavior, in particular organizational and intercultural communication, and I got a minor in international business. And so after college, I graduated in 2001 from college, and I was working at the Four Seasons Hotel at the time, and I had gotten a job in London to start in January of 2002. But we all know what happened in 2001. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, 9/11 happened. Many lives lost, many lives changed, including mine. My job that I had gotten in London, because I was working in Arizona at the time, got eliminated because business slowed down. And so my plans to move to London just went away and my life went on a different path. And I ended up staying in the United States. I went and got a master's degree. I got a master's degree from University of Phoenix. Some people think it's positive. Some people think it's negative. Doesn't matter because I have a master's. I have an MBA in marketing.
I was going to say the most important in marketing. Okay.
Yeah, in marketing. And I absolutely did nothing with it. I ended up moving to New York to pursue fashion design, in part because I had an ex-boyfriend, who had a sister who went to Parsons, and he told me a story about her and how she had studied fashion, but she ended up leaving New York and regretted it. And so that kind of stuck with me, and it made me apply to Parsons, and I got in on my first try.
Wait. Okay. Because already you've gone off on all these different paths. How did you apply to Parsons without having, at least that we know of so far, any background in fashion? Or did you?
I had 0.0% experience in
I
fashion.
have the
I just
feeling there's going
loved
to be
it.
a pattern in your story is that you don't, and then you do, and then
Yes.
you like,
No,
okay, okay.
no experience in fashion. I just love
Wow.
fashion. I put together a nice piece that I presented. I wrote a nice
Yes.
essay. I expressed my passion.
Okay.
And I got into the fashion studies program at Parsons, and I moved to New York in 2005. August 26th, 2005 is when I moved to New York, and that changed everything for me.
Oh,
I went to Parsons for a year. During that time, I worked different fashion shows. I experienced so many different job interviews. I actually wrote about my first year in New York. I went on over 100 interviews and got rejected over 100 times.
mm,
And most of those
wow.
jobs were in the fashion industry. You name a fashion office, I was there. I have
Okay.
interesting stories to tell about Vogue, but I won't tell it here.
Ooh.
I I tried so hard, and eventually I ended up getting a really cool opportunity through from Jones, New York, which some people may know Jones, New York, and some people may
Hmm.
not. They offered free classes after work, so I was actually working as a temp for J.P. Morgan in their securities division. Don't ask me what I was doing; I don't even remember. But I was really wanting to work in fashion after I had dropped out of Parsons,
Yeah.
but it wasn't really happening. And I saw this opportunity that Jones was offering to take free classes to become a technical fashion designer. And technical fashion designers focus on
Interesting.
the fit of a garment. So everything that everybody wears has probably been fit on some model before you actually wear it. And if it's not an actual model, now people are doing 3D modeling. But I took a class for 4 months after work, and after those 4 months, they gave you an opportunity to interview for the job, and I got the job. I ended up working
Wow.
as a technical fashion designer for Jones New York, collection, actually, for 2 years. And I stayed with Jones. I went from being a technical fashion designer to becoming an IT trainer, an information technology trainer. How?
Okay.
I didn't like my boss. I mean, that's the story. I didn't like my boss. And I expressed to one of my friends who worked on the information technology team, like, I'm really not happy. I want to leave. And he said, don't leave the company. This is a great company. Why don't you just come
Leave the
work with us?
division.
We need a trainer. So, and you're good on the system. So that's what I ended up doing. I ended up becoming an IT trainer. From IT trainer, I became a business analyst. From business analyst, I became a project manager. I ended up going back to school because my company, Jones at the time, reimbursed for classes. And so I said, let me take advantage of this. So I went back to school. I went to NYU's School of Professional Studies and I studied project management. I ended up
Mm.
becoming
Oh my
I got a
goodness.
certification from NYU.
I'm sorry because when our guests are sharing their backgrounds, one of the things that I'm constantly thinking about is like I want to connect these women, right? Like our guests who don't know one another, I'm constantly in my mind thinking like, okay, so, and I feel like I could connect you with every single guest we've ever had because these skills that you have are useful. Obviously, you're building business skills. I mean, well, I hear two things, right? Is like there's fashion, but there's business and tech,
Mhm.
which are two things that, certainly, first of all, in our packages of the guests that are on our show, Black women, gender expansive people, there aren't a whole lot of us out there. And here you have these incredible strength in these skills that you're building. Sorry, I just had to say that because I'm
Yeah.
thinking, I would imagine you are quite the hot commodity. Okay. Okay. So,
Okay.
okay.
So
Sorry.
yeah,
So,
so
yeah.
I ended up getting a certificate from NYU. I
Okay.
also became a certified project manager through the Project Management Institute. So I'm a certified PMP. I
Yes.
also became a certified Scrum Master. So
What
I
is
was
that one?
really
Certified.
Scrum Master. It's a
What is
way.
that?
It's a methodology for managing projects through like the Agile Institute. So it's a very the tendency is that you'll manage projects like on a this is one example, like a 2 week basis. So every 2 weeks, you'll build out something new for a system. And there's a methodology behind how to
Okay.
manage that. And it's a little bit different than a traditional, like what they consider a waterfall way of managing a project where you like,
Okay.
you build everything at once, whereas
Okay.
something that's more agile, you'll build little parts at a time to it.
Mm.
So there's different ways of managing projects. So
So you
I
kind
learned all these.
of get an expertise within a particular way of
Yeah,
doing project management. It's
yeah,
Scrum. Okay.
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right.
So I did that. And then after 6 years working at Jones, I decided to make a change in part because I was grossly underpaid and I just was not appreciated.
Mm.
So I
Mm.
started interviewing and I ended up getting a job with a company called iSoftStone, which is a consulting company. And they were working on site at Coach. So I was working at Coach and I
Mm.
worked on a system there for a year. And after that year, a friend of mine had left. We were working together, had left and had gone to Michael Kors and said, "Hey, do you want to come to Michael Kors? They need somebody for 3 months." And I said, "You know what? Yes." At that time, I was doing more like product management. And so I came into a consulting role as a senior product manager at Michael Kors, managing supply chain and working with the business intelligence team. And I did that for a year. And it was during that year that I started to say, I don't really think that this is my path. I think
Mm.
that there's something different for me. And I started taking one of the things that professor told me a long time ago was like, keep taking classes, never stop learning, and that way
Yes.
you'll always have a job. Right.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
was like, yeah, you know what? I really think that I want to try some different things. A lot of the work I had done within the fashion industry was internal systems specifically related to supply chain. And so I was like, I really want to do something more digital, more outward
Mm.
facing, like something different. So I started taking different classes. I went back to NYU, took the School of Professional Studies. I built a website in 3 weekends where I learned some basic HTML, CSS, and
Wow.
JavaScript.
Okay.
I took classes at General Assembly. I think I went to the Flatiron School. There were all kinds of places where I was taking classes, and I took digital marketing. I took user experience design. I took product design. I took all these classes, and something about user experience design stuck with me.
Mm.
And so I ended up going, while I was at Michael Kors, I ended up taking classes at night where I took a 14-week user experience design course, and during that time, I came up with an idea that was actually for Michael Kors that they tried to build later on. um, and I enjoyed the course, and so when my time was up at Michael Kors, when my contract was up, I took a break. I went and traveled to Europe for six
Okay, I'm
weeks.
going to stop you there
Yeah,
because my next question was or is asking you to kind of do a breakdown of UX, AR, and VR because these are going to be terms that we're talking about, and UX is user experience, right? Is
yeah,
that right? User
yes,
experience, which is what you've come to at this point in your story is like you're drawn into designing systems around that. So since we're here, and this is where you started to kind of ramp that up, will you just tell us what does user experience mean? What does UX mean?
Well, you can ask 5 different people what user experience design means, and they'll tell you 5 different things.
Yes.
My definition of it is either people can use what you make or they can't, and that determines the user experience. So this
Is it
refers
specific?
to
Yeah, go ahead.
digital.
Sorry. Okay.
It could
Mm-hmm.
be something digital, so it could be a website.
Mm-hmm.
We've all faced frustrations with websites, and
Mm-hmm.
that is what you would consider bad user experience.
Okay.
When things are nice and they flow, and you can buy that thing on Amazon, it's pretty
Mm.
nice user experience, right? So, again, for me, it goes back to either I can use your thing and I feel good, or I can't use your thing and I feel
Okay.
frustrated. And
Okay.
that's my definition of user
Got
experience
it.
because we've all had the, oh, yeah, that was so easy to do, or wow, I had to step away and I came back to it later because it was so
Mm.
frustrating to me. an example of bad
Of
user
bad user
experience.
experience. And I know you also just said that this is in, where we'll hear that terminology, user experience or UX, is mostly in tech, but with your broad definition, it's also, and we'll talk about this, I know, because of your focus on accessibility. We can talk about that with like a user experience of somebody who doesn't have a ramp to, like when the Academy Awards, somebody didn't have a ramp to get up to the stage to accept their award, right? Is it
Right.
like, so can physical experiences also, in your definition, that's included in UX?
100%.
Okay.
So when one time I had to kind of try to convince people to adopt more accessibility things like in the way that we were working. In particular, I was talking to a marketing team and I didn't know how to approach them. And my boss at the time was like, well, maybe you could show them this comic. And it's a comic by Michael Giangreco, and it's from like 2000 or something. And the comic shows a scene of a snowy day outside of a school. There's a person who is shoveling the stairs, and there's a ramp that's also covered in snow. And there's a group of kids who are waiting for this person to clear the snow, including a person who's in a wheelchair.
Mm.
And the person in the wheelchair says, could you clear off the ramp? And the person who is cleaning up the snow from the stairs says, I'm clearing these stairs. I'll get to the ramp.
Mm.
And then
Mm.
the person in the wheelchair says, but if you clear the ramp, we can all get it.
Mm. Mm.
And when I
Yes.
showed that to the marketing team about why we should make
Yeah.
things more accessible for people with disabilities, they got it. They understood it. When I've shown this to students, when I've shown this in my presentation at different corporations,
Yes.
they
Yes.
get it.
Right. Right.
Right.
Right.
And it's just something like I feel
Yeah.
talking about accessibility and thinking about it is something we need to constantly remind ourselves of, as each and every one of us is going to experience disability at some point or another in
Yes.
our life.
Yes.
Every single
Yep.
person,
Yep.
either
Yep.
through time with
Yep.
aging or through accidents or whatever. It
Right.
happens to us all. And
So
the
why
fact
not
that
make the
so many,
world a
yeah,
place where we all can take the ramp?
yeah,
Right.
this is, yes.
Brilliant. And
Mhm.
brilliant, important, and sometimes it's frustrating when we feel like, I mean, not it's amazing and wonderful when there's like a meme that we can use to say, this is what I'm trying to say. I can do all the scholarship, I can do all of the, all of these different things, and here's this meme. At the same time, if it helps to plant it into people's brains, like this makes sense to us, right? Amazing. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. And then I'm sorry because I interrupted your journey story. So you started to turn your focus into user experience,
Yeah,
and then yeah.
so I
Mm-hmm.
decided to leave product management behind. I had worked so many years in information technology in the fashion industry with some of the
Mm.
biggest, best companies in the world, and it was cool. I just didn't want to do that
Wasn't
anymore. And
okay.
so so then I ended up actually being a lead UX person at Ralph Lauren of all places, which was such a wonderful experience. And it
Really?
was a great
Wow.
experience. Yeah. So that's
Good.
where I ended
Good.
up after doing about a year of freelance user experience design work. I ended up at Ralph Lauren. They liked my previous experience in fashion, and
Mm.
it was fun. Like I really enjoyed my time there. And after that, I ended up in a senior manager of UX role that I didn't love as much. And then I decided I want to do my own thing. And I started my own
Mm.
consulting business.
Mm.
And it was cool because my first client was huge. And so anybody who starts a business knows, like, hey, I got my first client, they're a big client, and everything's going to be smooth sailing. And in the interim, back in 2015, I started teaching user experience design. I started as
Mm.
like a teacher assistant, and then I became a lead instructor, primarily working at General Assembly. And then I went on to be an adjunct professor at Pace University, and then I became
Mm.
an adjunct at NYU back in 2018. And that was another turning point because that was also around the time that I had started my business. So
Mm.
I my business was okay for a while. I actually
Tell us
hired two people.
exactly kind
Yeah,
of what was the mission statement of the business? What was the name of the
sure.
company?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, sure. So it still exists actually, my company, but I don't do
Or I'm
anything with it
sorry,
much.
I removed the
No, no.
past tense. What
Yeah.
is the
No, no, no.
yes, yes.
So my business is Gilbert Consulting Group
Hmm.
Inc. And it was a small like boutique user experience design. So we would help people make their websites. We worked with, like I said, businesses big and small. We were like subcontractors as well for like bigger agencies. So there were a lot of different work that I did, a lot of it under NDA that I can't discuss. And I really enjoyed it, and it was also very hard, being
Mm,
like a woman show to like,
yeah,
try to bring in the business, doing the work itself, trying to market myself,
so
trying,
much.
joining the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce and trying
Yeah,
to like get involved with other businesses, telling
yeah.
people how important accessibility is to their business. Because one of the things that I did with my job is like once somebody maybe potentially got sued or something like that, I would go in and help them plan how they would go about addressing the issues and then how the design team could possibly like making plans. Like part of my project
Mm,
management came into play too. Like how much training are people going to get? What teams need to be trained?
mm-hmm.
Um, how long is it going to take to fix these things? Like talking with the product managers, talking to the developers, talking to the chief technology officers, and finding out like what is the runway that we have in
Mm,
order to get
mm,
this done. Is there a
mm.
time frame? All these things that I help do.
And all these things that are take a lot of time when you're
They do
also
take a
your
lot of
marketing
time.
person and you're,
Yeah,
business
yeah, it was
manager and
tough.
everything
Yeah,
else. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. And then I
right.
brought on two other people, and that was also challenging. And then business
Yeah.
started to not be so great.
Mm,
And
mm,
in 2019, I was approached about applying for a job at NYU as a visiting professor, which is a 1 year role
mhm.
as a professor. And I said, well, I have my own business. And they said, well, you could still do your own business. This is a visiting professor. Like if you were full-time faculty, you can't have your own business. But
Mhm, mhm.
I said, okay. So this happened to be the 2019-2020 academic year. And so I was still doing my business and I was teaching as a visiting faculty member. And then the pandemic hit.
Mm, mhm, mhm.
And when the pandemic hit, it hit my business as well. And I really
Yeah.
wasn't sure as to what to do next. I enjoyed my teaching role here, but I was at NYU, but I was like, I don't know. And they happened to have a role open up, and I applied for it and I got it. So
Okay.
I ended up staying, and I am now 3 years in
Nice.
to working as a
Lucky
full-time
students.
faculty
Lucky
member,
student. Yeah.
and I teach user experience design. And I
Mhm.
also teach assistive technology. I co-teach an assistive technology class called Looking Forward, typically in the spring, with Gus Chalkias, and we teach students about the assistive tech that blind and low vision people use.
Yes.
And I also have taught a voice user interface class. I teach a class called Human Spatial Computing, which is more about the human side of AR and VR and having students think about things from an ethical lens, thinking about the
Yes.
mind, thinking about bias, thinking about the stuff they're making and not just making stuff and then thinking about it later, which is what I
Mm,
often find with technology. It's like we are not thinking about
mm.
the risks. And when I was a
We're seeing
project
that with
manager,
AI right now, right? And I feel
yeah,
like that's
like,
probably some of the controversy around Sam Altman. Is that's his name, right? That did Open AI. that he got fired and then went back on, and it's this whole, conflict around those of us who are thinking about the potential negatives to this, and then those of us who are also embracing it as something that can make the world better. Anyway, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, and this is the media literacy for for digital or for tech,
Yeah.
right? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And let me just go back to
Yes.
2017,
Mm-hmm.
2018 time.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually working out of a WeWork in Harlem, and
Mm.
I sat next to an augmented reality company. And, you get to talking to people in your office, and they were like, "What do you do?" I said, "Oh, I'm a UX designer." And they said, "We need some UX help." And I said, "Oh, cool. Like, I'm, I'm willing to help." So getting to talk to them and exchanging ideas with them prompted me to want to learn more about augmented reality. So for people in the audience who
Mm.
may not know, augmented
Yes,
reality,
please.
you
Thank
do
you.
know it, but you don't know it. If you've ever watched a sporting event and you see overlays on the screen, that's augmented reality through your television.
Hi, family. This is Sista Brunch, the podcast that shares amazing Black women and gender expansive people with you weekly during our regular season, with all kinds of fun bonus episodes as well. Stay tuned for more of our conversation with our guest, Reginé Gilbert. And I have to ask, if you love our show, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or wherever you listen to this podcast, and share it with your friends, colleagues, nieces, nephews, children, grandchildren, grandma, grandpa, all of the above, anybody who wants to learn about working in entertainment and media.
For example, if you watch football, which I have 3 brothers and a father who all watch football. If you watch football and you see a line on the field, but then you don't actually see the line on the field, that is augmented reality, and you're seeing it through your television screen.
Mm.
The way that we see augmented reality today, but we don't call it augmented reality, is through Snapchat, Instagram, and anytime you put a filter on your face, that is augmenting the reality, right? So the generic term is that it's a digital overlay to a physical object.
Thank you. So
Okay,
so
so
if
yeah,
you're looking at the object in person, you don't see these things. If you're looking at it through some kind of screen, you see things appear there. So
yes,
the filters is such a great example because I feel like everybody uses them.
everybody uses them. Everybody
Yeah.
wants to be beautiful, and you all are
Yeah.
beautiful without the
Oh,
filters.
exactly. Exactly. Say that 100 times, especially our guests. We need to hear it. Need to be reminded. Yes. And
So
me.
I
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
interested in augmented reality and learning more about it, and then I actually started incorporating it into my classes because of
Mm.
the colleagues who worked in the co-working space. They introduced me to people who were doing no code AR stuff that I brought into my classroom,
Mm.
because I thought it was really cool for students to
All right,
like
sister, I
apply
gotta stop
augmented
you there. So
reality.
you said
Yeah.
no code VR or AR stuff. So
Yes.
what does that mean? No code.
So that meant students would download an app, and then they would um, pick some augmented reality character. A lot of them chose things from like Star Wars and like Jedi Knights and stuff to be like, in our classroom, right? And using a mobile device. And at that time, it really was burning the battery out of people's mobile
Okay.
devices really
Okay.
badly, because this is a while back, right? But it was cool, bringing that into the classroom. And other than putting like a Jedi Knight in the classroom, there wasn't really much else to do with that.
Okay.
However, I told students to keep an eye on this. I think this is the future of where we're going. And then at the same time, I started attending different events, like New York City Media Lab would have these events where they would have talks around VR. And I just got really interested. And it's funny, I found a sketch in my sketchbook from 2017, actually, that has like AR, VR, AI, wearables, like all this stuff that I sketched
Yes.
out that's like
Right.
happening And I
Yes.
said, was I like, I didn't even realize, I mean, uh, uh, that I would be working on this stuff. So one of the things that happened in 2019 was that NYU approached me about creating a user experience design class for AR and VR.
Right.
And so
Okay.
I
So
was
now that
able
we've
to, yeah,
included
so
VR,
VR,
let's make sure we talk about the difference between
yeah.
AR and VR.
Yeah, so
And then, yeah.
typically virtual reality will
Mm-hmm.
involve some sort of headset,
Mm-hmm.
um, but not always. I think that's an assumption that people should get away from because
Okay.
virtual reality can also be on your computer. So
Oh,
one
interesting.
of
Okay.
the things that people you think of VR or virtual reality and you think of somebody putting on this headset and you have
Right.
to be within this thing, but there's also a thing called web VR, and so web VR is typically like a 3D environment. One that I have
Okay.
my students work with is Mozilla Hubs. It's a free area, and like this in my human spatial computing class that I teach, I had them work on a web VR project that was related to music because I
Mhm.
love music and I was going to have them do something for the 50th anniversary of hip hop, but I was like, that's selfish. I need to let them choose
Oh,
for
no,
themselves.
make them do it. Yes, yes.
No.
Okay. Yes.
And so they each created different worlds. Like for example, and this is all on a computer where you can navigate with your mouse or your keyboard. And one of the more
Okay.
powerful environments that someone created was a home that asked questions and played kind of some melancholic music, but then the music became upbeat because it was about somebody's journey through depression. And
Wow.
so it was like
Wow.
walking through this house and you are this avatar moving through.
So augmented reality, we is something all of us are kind of experiencing a lot because so many TV shows, sports games, etc., and then the filters, and then virtual reality feels to me a little less accessible. Like it's not something we're holding on to in our daily lives. Like we have to get something, whether it's the headset like an Oculus, or now when you're saying that it could be on a screen, does that also mean that I'm physically in a space that where, or you're saying that for this student who created this one of the
It's all
house,
looking at it on your computer.
just looking directly on the computer?
Yep.
Okay, so then I don't it feels a little bit like what my understanding of AR was because
Yeah,
it's looking
so
at a screen. Is
yeah,
it?
let me
Okay.
let me
Okay.
let me clarify and
Thank
differentiate.
you.
Also, a researcher named Pablo Cardenas says 97.81% of the world has not tried virtual reality yet.
Okay. Okay.
Right. So there's a
Okay.
large population that has not tried virtual
Even tried
reality.
it. Okay.
So augmented reality is a digital overlay to a physical environment.
Got it. Yes. Okay.
Virtual reality is where you are immersed
Mm-hmm.
into an environment, either by putting on a VR headset or by viewing it on a screen, such as a computer.
Okay. Okay.
So the difference between AR and VR, and then there's a mixture of where you could have both
Oh, I'm
called
sure.
mixed reality.
Okay.
And this is where like the Apple's new headset does a mix.
Okay.
Um, I actually have the Meta, I have
Wow.
the Meta
Yes.
Quest
Oh,
Pro, right?
okay. Wow.
Has where you could see a digital overlay or you could be immersed fully in an
Okay.
experience. So
Okay. Okay.
there is a
Okay.
difference.
So it's you inside of the world almost. I mean, if that right,
Yes,
as opposed to there's a bit of a separation with AR, which is like you're looking at it. Like you if you're watching a sports football, you're looking at it, but you're not playing football. You're not on the
correct.
field. Whereas
Right,
virtual reality, even if it's through a screen, the point is that you are inside of that world.
right.
Okay. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Got it. Got it.
Yeah. So I
Okay.
became passionate about this area. And when I
Nice.
became a
Yeah.
full-time faculty member, one of the things I was told was like, you need a research focus. And I was like, what should I focus on for my research. And I thought I would like to look at inclusion and accessibility
Mm,
in the AR and VR space because I think about using this stuff when I get older. And will I be able
mm,
to?
okay. Yep.
And how much stuff is being made for folks with disabilities now? And so I first started by looking at the tools that are being used in industry and seeing what the accessibility and inclusion was of those tools.
Mm,
So, did they cost money? Right? Because that's a barrier to entry for a lot of
right.
people. Do you need to have a certain type of computer? Because that's also a
Mm,
barrier to
okay.
entry. Is there any mention of accessibility or doing anything with disabilities? So my research assistant, Saki Asakawa, and I ended up creating a huge, huge spreadsheet that nobody wanted to read. It's like, nobody wants to see this. So we, from there, created a subway map of the different
Oh,
tools that can be used and for what.
nice. Nice.
And we put this out in the world in 2020. Nobody really saw it. And people are like, why don't you push this out more? And I was like, well, at this point, it's old, so I'm not going to. But it would be fun to update it if I had more
Yes.
resources and people.
Yes. Yes.
But there are also other people who work on doing that kind of stuff as well. So yeah, so I started researching in 2019 accessibility and inclusion in AR and VR. This also, during the 2019 year, I applied for a design residency at Falling Water, which is the Frank Lloyd Wright home. And the design
Mm,
residency was specifically for people who work in immersive technologies.
wow.
And the design residency was only 5 days, but those 5 days were offline. And we were with other creatives, so designers, developers who all worked in AR and VR. And the idea behind this design residency, which was co-created by Doug Northcook, who will later come into the picture in my life, the idea was to be offline, you get more creative. And we
Mm,
immersed ourselves in
mm,
architecture and in nature, and specifically Frank Lloyd Wright's architecture and his home, Falling Water, which some people may or may not know about, but it's a home that is built on top of a waterfall
mm,
and used a lot of the things that were used to build the home were actually from that area. So the stone and things like that. And really thinking about how can nature and architecture influence your creative process,
mm,
and being
mm,
offline actually helps people be more creative, I think, and it did for me.
mm,
And so during that design residency, I met Doug Northcook, who at the time was a professor at Chatham University. And I later worked with him on co creating a human centered design course for Chatham. And then I told him, oh, I have these ideas like for a book. And I had already written a book, which I didn't even talk about, but I'll talk about that in a minute.
mm.
And so Doug and I started brainstorming, and we came up with an idea for a book called Human Spatial Computing for the Future. And ultimately, we landed on the title Human Spatial Computing. We put the book proposal out there to a few publishers. And then eventually, Oxford University Press said, yeah, we want to publish your book.
Nice. Nice.
And so this is a book that Doug and I just wrapped up. We thought it would come out this year, but it's likely to come out in 2024. It is published through an academic publishing company. However, it is a book that I do feel like if you have interest in augmented reality, virtual reality, or mixed reality, and you want to get an understanding of what do I need to think about, right? What do
Mm.
I need to think about from an ethics perspective, from a universal design perspective, storytelling perspective? This is the book that Doug and I have put together.
Hey, it's Fanchen, and you're listening to Sista Brunch. We'll be back in a minute, and while you jam out to this theme song, if you haven't done this already, head on over to our Instagram and follow us at Sista Brunch Podcast, and head to our website and sign up for our newsletter, sistabrunch.com.
I want to just go back a little bit to, I'm going to go back to 2017. Okay.
Okay.
2017-ish. I was asked to do a talk at a conference, a graphic design conference, and I said yes because at that point I had started talking about accessibility. And so I did a presentation at a graphic design conference, and it didn't go well, in part because I had really tiny fonts and the people in the very back could not see it.
Mm, mm.
And it was a good learning experience for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And I also felt really awful. Like
Mm-hmm.
one of
Here,
the
here,
things that
here you are
yeah,
focused on inclusion, and
I
which
focused
is
on
what
inclusion and
happens, right? It's
accessibility.
an
And
accessibility. Yeah. Right.
yeah, people
Right.
were not nice. I got some mean tweets. It was a thing.
Mm,
And so I was really kind of devastated from it. But what, I don't know who was there or what, but a few weeks after that, I got approached by somebody from A Press Publishing saying, "Would you be interested in doing a book
mm.
on, on accessibility?" And I was like, "Sure." And then I was like, "What could I call it?" And I was like, "Oh, inclusive design for digital world."
Yeah.
I think I was calling it a digital age,
Okay.
but it ended up being inclusive design for digital world. So in 2018, 2019, I wrote the book, and it came out very late, 2019. And I thought, ooh, 2020, I was doing my first keynote in 2020. I was
Yeah.
like, ooh, I bought 250
Oh,
books because I was like,
2020.
yeah, I'm
Oh,
going to
2020. Yes.
sell all these
So
books.
many plans. So many plans that have still
Yeah.
not been fulfilled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, my book
Wow.
ended up
Okay.
being a number one bestseller, like before it, like pre-release
Yes.
bestseller. So
Yes.
I can call myself a best-selling author because for
Yes, you
one day
can.
I was the best-selling author on Amazon. So I was really happy that I got a lot of support for my book, and it did all right. It did all right, and
Yes.
people liked it. So not everybody did, and that's okay too, because I think one thing that people need to realize is that some people are going to like what you do and some people aren't, but it
Hmm.
doesn't mean that you shouldn't do that thing.
And to your point about the lesson that you learned in giving that keynote, we must allow ourselves and others to evolve. That, like,
Hmm.
if there are aspects of the thing that people don't like, that you also don't like, or that you also have grown to see actually might be better, then allow us to grow, right? Like, all of us need to be able to grow. And
Yeah.
particularly, I think, in the inclusion and accessibility space, because this is systemic, right? There are things that we have not addressed fully. And when we address them, we're consistently experimenting with what is the best way. And that does, so, and then we keep realizing who we've left out. Like that, I think about that all the time, is like my inclusion language is growing. Like, I didn't include A in the DEI, right? And it's
Mhm.
like, okay, no, this should have been there all along. It wasn't. And now we include it. And now, like those of us who aren't thinking about it. So all to say, I think it's such a good point. It's one of the reasons, and for younger listeners, please consider things like cancel culture. First of all, because you could get canceled tomorrow. So there's the karma aspect, period. But also consider that we're human beings. Now, some folks continually repeat their oppressive systems and behaviors. That's different. But for those of us who are in this work, let us learn to grow so that you can also learn and grow. So anyway, that's my little PSA on that. Okay, yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah,
So you
no,
do the book in
no,
2019,
yes.
2020 happens. But meanwhile, you're getting attention for the book. People are reading this, and it sounds like it is a very unique approach that not enough people are paying attention to, right? Like an important, unique viewpoint of how we do digital, how we do tech, and like who needs to be included in all of that and in the design of it. And yes. Okay. So we come to 2020. You've done the book. By the way, this is the Sista Brunch podcast record for the longest journey story. But it's perfect because all along the way I have stopped you and asked questions, and these are the questions that I would have asked you later in the interview. But we do have to wrap up too, because these are really seedlings planted for our guests. I can tell you personally, I will be in touch with you on so many projects that I have happening, both at my company and for Sista Brunch. I hope we can collaborate together. But I want to make sure we wrap up with anything you want to wrap up with. Then I have our signature Sista Brunch question that I will ask you. And then we will have you back on, as well as have you hopefully in person with some of the things that we're doing in person. So I want to make sure that your journey, anything that you want to add about your journey, that you get that in.
Well, I just want to thank you for having me on the show. And the question I would want to have the audience think about is,
Yes.
when you are creating anything, whether it's film, whether it's literature, whether it's music, think about who your audience is and think about who you might be excluding from the start.
Yes. And build the ramp so that everybody can be included. I love it. Okay. And that's likely going to be part of your answer to this next one, but also feel free to expand on that or add different things. So our Sista Brunch question is that you, Reginé, are sitting down to a Sista Brunch with your younger self. And what are you both eating? What are you both drinking? And then what do you tell her?
Oh, so we would be eating tacos.
Tacos are popular, and I'm sorry,
they're delicious.
They're so delicious. You're on the East Coast, so I wasn't a big taco fan on the East Coast. On the West Coast, but you were in Arizona. So anyway, okay.
I'm a
all right.
California girl, born in Inglewood and raised in Oxnard. So
Wait a minute, we didn't even know that.
We didn't even go there.
Favorite taco for you, and did it change since you were younger? Was she having a different flavor of taco? Okay. What's your favorite?
Carne asada.
I got it. Okay. And drinks?
I love sparkling water.
It's good. Do you flavored or no flavor?
Flavored.
What flavor do
you get? Limoncello. LaCroix or LaCroix. I don't know how you say it.
I don't know either, but I know. It's good. Yep. Okay. I love it. Okay. And what do you tell her?
I would tell her everything's going to be okay and you are enough.
Beautiful. Reginé, again, just the beginning of Sista Brunch with you. I hope you will come back on. There's so much more to share. As I said, you are a unique guest for us and an important one. And all of us in entertainment and media need to be thinking in these ways. And so we're so grateful for your time. And we'll be in touch soon. Thank you. It has been such a joy sharing this time with Reginé Gilbert. I learned so much from having her on. As you can tell, we could have gone on and on and on, but we had to finish this one to be able to do the rest of ours. But we will have her back. And also, so much gratitude to all of you, our listeners. Your support truly means everything to us. As I sign off, remember that your stories are as powerful and important as our guests, so keep on sharing them with the whole world. You can read the transcript of every episode of Sista Brunch and find show notes on our website at sistabrunch.com. If you prefer to see our faces, and our guests are so beautiful, I strongly recommend it. You can watch the full video interviews on the Trujulo YouTube channel, youtube.com/Trujulo Media. That's TRUJULO Media. We deeply appreciate your support by subscribing to our podcast, leaving us a great review, and sharing the podcast with your friends, family, colleagues, and community. Season 5 of Sista Brunch is brought to you by Trujillo Productions. Our show creators are Anya Adams, Christabel Nciabwadi, Brittany Turner, and me, Fanchon Cox. Sista Brunch is a Women Make Movies production assistance program project. We acknowledge that the land I record the podcast on is the original land of the Tongva and the Chumash people. Take good care, everybody, and we'll see you next time.